Hello everyone, I'm Carpin Gizmat, and welcome to the second episode of Mechanics Dismantled. The first episode did pretty well, by my standards anyway. In only 3 days it became a most viewed video in fact, so we're back at it today with episode 2. This episode we'll be taking a look at boards, specifically types of game board and their respective advantages and disadvantages. Not just boards, but play spaces as a whole. Let's start with something extremely basic. Square boards have been used for ages and ages, from chess to Go, all the way through to something like D&D, to video games like XCOM and Chess with Waifus. These are really simple to work with because they work on 2 planes only, X and Y. You can think of a square board as a field of points, connected by vertical and horizontal pathways. A chessboard, for example, would look like this, represented as a field of points. A piece can occupy one of these points and move in 4 directions to get to the others. These are very easy for humans to visualize, and determining the area occupied by, say, a building is easy as a simple multiplication. However, the square board isn't without its flaws. These flaws mainly come when dealing with diagonals, or any distance that isn't between 2 points lying on the same line. In these 4 directions, a piece must travel exactly 1 unit to get to its neighbour, but when moving diagonally, it has to travel a distance of root 2 units. Not nice. Many games, the famous Dungeons & Dragons included, circumvent this problem by just never using diagonals. Moving diagonally requires 2 hops rather than 1. Any kind of measurement that isn't in a straight line requires an approximation to the closest number of squares. While it may seem like it throws up a load of weird inaccuracies, the approximation actually improves the closer you get to a cardinal direction, so it's actually alright. Now let's move on to a hexagonal board, time-tested and the favourite of bees around the world. A hex board doesn't suffer from the diagonal problem that square boards do, because all of the possible jumps you can make have a distance of exactly 1 unit from your starting point. Games such as Settlers of Catan, Heroescape and the Civilization series use hexagonal spaces in their boards. The problem with hexagonal boards is, it's quite hard to represent real-life objects with them. As humans, we like to do things in straight lines, and we're used to it. But on a hexagonal board, there are no uninterrupted straight lines. As such, it gets very hard to mark out buildings, streets and other structures. They just go all wiggly. The games that include hex boards include them because they know they'll work. Catan and Civilization limit their structures to 1 per tile to prevent things getting too funky, and Heroescape tends towards natural landscapes like grass, rivers and forests that work well with these weird and uneven contours. Many other board games use tessellation, or repeatable series of connecting shapes, in this way. The 2 most popular are squares and hexagons, since the only other shapes that tessellate, apart from them, are triangles. It's entirely possible to have boards and play spaces that don't tessellate at all. If we think of a game like Monopoly, for example, and use a similar abstract representation as before, then it's just a ring of connected points. No need for diagonals or funky maths. These are extremely simple, and don't usually have movement as their central mechanic if they're implemented into a game. Up until now we've been dealing with discrete fields of points, that is, a game piece can occupy a point in a field and nothing in between. But what about a game that uses real-life measurement units such as Warhammer? Well, we can think of this as a continuous field of points rather than a discrete one. That is, infinite points connected by infinite pathways, all infinitely close together. This kind of board game lends itself to extreme precision and tactical play, since you can fine-tune your movement to within millimeters, and it's easy to represent any kind of object with just a model or a drawing. However, you do need measuring equipment for this kind of game. It's best for the kind of game where not only movement, but also measuring distances is a core part of it. This is more of an interesting side note, but while I was researching for this video I found a game called Lightspeed. Lightspeed is the only game which concerns real-life measurement, but only in 2 dimensions. The way you play Lightspeed is by slapping down ship cards faster than your opponents, and then judging the path of the lasers to see if they hit anything else currently on the table. A really cool and unique concept. While it is entirely possible for boards of any kind to be 2D or 3D, the only games that I have ever seen use exact measurement are those that do it in 3 dimensions, mostly strategic war games. I just thought it was quite cool to have that same concept, but all flattened down into cards. Anyway, that concludes my brief analysis on boards and play spaces. By abstracting a board into a field of points, either in 2 or 3 dimensions, we can judge its validity for the game that it might be applied to. Ultimately, every kind of board has its advantages and its disadvantages. There's no perfect board that we could use for everything, and that's okay. It's one of the elements that contributes to the amazing variety of board and video game play spaces out there today. I've been Carpin Gizmat, and thanks for joining me for this episode of Mechanics Dismantled. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below suggesting which mechanic I should cover next. Bye for now. I've been Carpin Gizmat, and thanks for joining me on the first episode of Fuck that up. I've been Carpin Gizmat, and thanks for joining me in the fair. I've been Carpin Gizmat, and thanks for joining me on the first episode. It's not the first episode. Fucking hell.